Right. So thank you very much, sir, to all the panel members. I'm delighted, I'm grateful to you for joining for this panel discussion. We had conceptualized this panel discussion some time back. We were observing the developments. However, Dr. Chaturvedi, director of BIMTech, he suggested that we should have a dialogue on this, not only on what has happened in past, but also how we're going to deal with this issue. So I had a discussion with Professor Ajit Mishra, Professor Alak Narayanji, who is very senior economist. Both of them are very senior economists of this country. Professor Santosh Mehrotra, who is going to join us at 4:30 because of certain reasons. He will join us 25 minutes late. Shri Harsh Singhji, who is senior advisor to UNDP. He has also written a book on the development economic issues, and he has his own model, which is called Navodaya model, on how the rehabilitation of the migrant workers can be planned. He's going to throw a little bit focus on that. Dr. S.P. Sharma, Chief Economist, PhD Chamber of Commerce, who will bring in the industry perspective on how industry is going to be influenced in positive, negative manner, both in different locations, right? In the central locations like larger cities, which are the industry cities like Ludhiana, Greater Noida, Haryana, which is Gurgaon, and so on, and also the remote areas which are slowly building up as remote pockets of industries, especially MSMEs. And Dr. Renata D'Souza, who is fellow at Observer Research Foundation. So we have a very, very balanced panel today. And I'm so grateful that this panel agreed to spend time with us. Most welcome to you all in this panel discussion. And we are having about 200 registrations who are going to join us over a period of time. However, we are being broadcasted in 3 Facebook platforms. So this is a very quick background. Just to give you a theme on what we started thinking and how did we conceptualize and then requested you, there has been a migration issue in past as well. But because of this pandemic, especially since March, and I'm including the festival also, Holi festival, along the pandemic when the reverse migration happened. So sometimes we include the migration which happened because of the festival. Sometimes we don't do that. But there are different reasons how reverse migration has taken place. And now industries on the economic side are in trouble. And at the social level, states are facing certain challenges. One of the biggest challenges which are coming up before the states, especially 6 states for which a different package was prepared, one of the biggest challenges is employment and rehabilitation of these people. And of course, skill comes into as a major influencer because these people will have very limited level of skills or very specialized skills which may not be useful in the state for the time being. Right. There are different studies like one by Professor Amitav Kundu, who said about 22, 25 million people have migrated. And it's going to be a very ad hoc mechanism. It's not going to be permanent. He has given his data and the reasoning. Another professor from IIM Ahmedabad, Chinmay Tumbe, he said about 30 million people have reverse migrated. Right, he has included the festival and the other economic indicators to calculate the migration. So there are many factors to it. There are political angles also, like Nitish Kumar said in 2005, that nobody is from Bihar is going to stay outside. Everybody is going to come back in my 5 years stay. We have seen 15 years going on, the BJP and in a combination of governments headed by Nitish Kumar. So there are certain evidences of what has happened in past. There are few developments happening in the last 3 months. There are certain initiatives taken by different governments, especially UP and Bihar. We wanted to focus on UP and Bihar, thinking these two states contribute probably the most in the migrant workers. And so we thought if we capture it, we are going to capture almost 30–40% of the overall migration population. So this is the background in which we are meeting today. I'm also thankful to all the participants who are joining in this room and also in the live streaming. Now I will request Professor Alaknarayan Sharma, who is a human development economist, to start the dialogue and present his views on. I have already requested him to also present a little bit background in which it has evolved. So, sir, may I request you to put your presentation forward and create the context of this panel discussion.
So we have around 15 minutes?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, thanks very much for inviting me. This is a very important topic on which you have organized this webinar. There's a lot of misconception about migration. Migration is a very important phenomenon, and in history of economic development, it has played very important role. But somehow, in Indian policy making, urbanization and migration have been somewhat neglected. And I consider that this growth of slums, distorted urbanization, and all that is a product of this lopsided policy. We always realize that rural development is good, migration is bad, and we encourage only elite migration, educated people migration. Most of us are migrants also, but we don't face these kinds of problems. So this migrants, and that is what can be better proof than this, that in the lockdown could not envisage that so many people are vulnerable people, migrant people are in our cities, and they will be on the road. So it shows the just distorted nature of the urbanization and migration policy. Let me say that migrants are not homogeneous. One category migrants, highly educated and all that, all of us, I said that we are migrants. There are permanent migrants, semi-permanent migrants, long-term migrants, and circular migrants. So all kinds of migrants. The current story about migrants, and probably in the minds of the organizer also, it is the category of vulnerable migrants. And they are vulnerable, they are mostly in informal sector of the urban economy or semi-urban economy. So we are mostly talking about those people. In our country, data on migration is not reliable. That is why there is so much hue and cry about how many people are migrating. We don't know much. But census data captures permanent long-term migration, but it doesn't capture circular short-term seasonal migration. NSS is also imperfect, so that is why we don't have very reliable, but nevertheless estimates, and estimates are that somewhat 110 million economists have done it, some economists who work on migration. Around 110 million long-term and short-term circulatory migrants are there, and they are mostly vulnerable. And UP and Bihar account for almost 50% of all these migrants. UP has largest number because its population is quite large. It is almost double than Bihar. But incidence of migration, intensity of migration is more in Bihar compared to UP. Bihar almost the intensity is much more in North Bihar compared to South Bihar, and UP it is mostly Eastern UP, Bundelkhand, as well as somewhat in Central UP region. Let me, since I told you that there is not much clarity about much about migration in general, and a lot of conceptions, some misconceptions are there. Talk about nature of migration in Bihar. I have been doing village studies in Bihar of 12 representative villages for the last almost 40 years. First I did when I was a young lecturer in Patna in 1981. Then we revisited those villages in 1998. Then we went there in 2009. And as recently as 2016-17, I went there. So since I don't have much time, I won't elaborate, but let me give some salient points, and then which will help you in conceptualizing the nature of migration. So, contrary to what Mr. Nitish Kumar said, the phenomenon of migration in Bihar has been increasing considerably. And all groups of people, there are all groups, migrants are from all groups of people, all castes, all classes. Educated, non-educated, all that. But most of the migrants in Bihar are vulnerable migrants. Our estimate is that 80% of the migrants from Bihar are vulnerable. Now 65% rather, 65% of all rural households in Bihar have at least one migrant person. And if you just estimate it, roughly 2 crores of people from Bihar every year migrate. And of course, they come back also. They live in the town, and 90% of them, 90%, 95% of them are males. Females generally don't migrate. Only 5% of the households have female migrants. Earlier migrants, when we did in 1981 and all that, they were confined to mostly agricultural work. But now they are fairly widespread. Delhi, Western India, Southern India, this is the new trend that Southern India people have started migrating. And earlier from Bihar, international migration was not there, but from some parts, international migration has also started. And please mind it, an important story of this migration is that male migrate and their families, their wife and children remain in the village. So these are multi-locational households. And as I said, around 2 crores of people everywhere here migrate. You can just understand the importance of this migration. We estimated that according to our recent estimates in 2016-17, 31% of all rural incomes of Bihar is derived from remittances. And all this is, Bihar rural wages is probably higher than Gujarat. It is much higher than Odisha, much higher than Jharkhand, much higher than Bengal, only because of this massive migration. the rural labor markets have transformed, poverty has declined, and all this is behind all this story, the contribution of migration goals. So, and in this in 1980s, 90s, and as recently between 2005 and 2011-12, there was massive decline in poverty in Bihar, and this is mainly because of migration, not because of the economic growth or anything which happened in Bihar. So I think this context one has to keep in mind before devising any policy. So in this background, what kind of policies, and I estimate suggest that, and this is not true of Bihar, I'm talking about UP, but maybe 40 to 50% of the migrants have returned to their native places in this wake of this lockdown. So then, in the wake of that, what should be, and your webinar is on rehabilitation and employment. I think the government policies and government rehabilitation package which emerged, in my view, it has largely neglected the migrants. The Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, this gives cash transfer, 500 rupees to Jan Dhan Yojana account holder and all that. Migrant won't be, and otherwise also it is a very bigger amount. So I think then the, of course, the PDS, if till November they have said that it will be extended, so that will benefit them. And NREGA, 40,000 crores rupees have been given. So very small extent, migrant population will be benefited by, and recently Prime Minister Rozgar Yojana in 118 districts have been announced to give employment to the migrant workers. I think these are, given the scale of challenge that I am talking about Bihar, but right. Nature of migration in Bihar and UP, particularly Eastern UP and Bihar, are more or less similar culturally, economically, pressure of population and all that. It is same. I think first of all, I believe that policy has to deal within two phases, one short term and one long term. Short term, there is a need of providing relief, and one relief can be easily, as I said, that this Prime Minister Garib Kalyan Yojana or Prime Minister Yojana own to it. One is NREGA can help, but the wages, average migrant, average remittance from Bihari migrant to rural areas is something around 2,500 rupees per month. Roughly, it is 28 to 30,000. It has more or less completely stopped at the moment. So this 200 NREGA wages. By the way, NREGA, Bihar is one state along with UP where NREGA has been mostly dysfunctional.
Right.
Per household employment has been very low and all that. So if it has to be strengthened, and that bureaucratic system is inefficient, but first of all, the wages has to rise from 300 to 200 to at least 300, and at least for 1 year. The number of days of guaranteed employment should be, in my view, 150 per household, not 100 households. So this is one. The other is
Sir,
this PDF would be, pardon?
yeah, so I'm just reminding that about 1 minute is left.
Just give me 2 minutes and I will finish.
Sure.
The other is entitlement of PDS, which should be at least for next 6 to 8 months universal. And third is some transfer of universal income, maybe 2,000 rupees per month for 6 months, because there is no now remittance is coming. In long term, just I will give the bullet points. I think all these migrants, the rural economy of Bihar and economy of UP can't absorb these migrant. They are not capable. They have to return, and the policies should be geared towards their long-term policy or medium-term policy. One is registration of migrants. Urban housing should be, now migration should feature in government policy, and urban housing should be considered a very, very important policy in the government, because migrants is just be seeing that one of the great handicap that they were facing was housing, and they live in slums and all that. So this is one. The other, and in that context, the affordable urban housing which the government has announced, I don't know, there is not much details available about that. That will go a long way. The third is entirely a skill mapping, facilitating migration. Where they should go, help them. So facilitating migration, not stopping migration, is the key to the policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. I think thank you for creating a fantastic foundation of not only what is happening today, but also how has it taken place in, in terms of migration, understanding migration. And at the end, you connected with the way forward and why should it connect with policy very strongly. And this is what I was discussing with Professor Ajit Mishra. So Professor Mishra is Director, Institute of Economic Growth, and has been a development economist who has a special inclination towards how policy should be tweaked to benefit, tweak for beneficiaries in the domain of development economics. So, sir, if I could request you to your views on how this problem should be handled and how should we see it happening?
Thank you, Rahul. Am I audible clearly?
Absolutely, yes, you're clear.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I must say out the outset that I've never worked on migration. It's very nice to listen to Professor Alok Sharma. And in fact, I should be on the other side of the panel, listening to you experts of the field. But when Rahul asked me about this, I immediately said yes, because sitting in a hospital bed, I'm a COVID patient. I was a COVID patient, so I was in Safdarjung, and sitting in the bed, all I was watching was these migrants, laborers, walking and all that, the human tragedy. So let's not go over it again. So I became interested in the subject of migration then. So I'm going to just say I'm no expert on UP or Bihar, so I cannot give you very specific things. So in fact, I would rather listen to you guys on that. But I'm going to make three observations, which are somehow broader in nature, and that also talks to the current opinions or the debate that you might call it, which you see unfolding in the popular press. Okay. And the first one, so we had it's about the numbers. So Professor Sharma has already mentioned this issue, and also Rahul mentioned right at the beginning. So my first challenge was to find out, how many migrants are there roughly, or how many reverse migration took place and stuff like this. It's a nightmare, especially somebody who has not worked in this area. This is impossible to get your head around because the numbers are so different. Okay. And so, in fact, I probably went finally with Chinmay Tumbe's number of 30 million. Okay. But even though I never put too much emphasis on number, because if a policy is relying on finer details of number, it's not a good policy. That's my personal view. But in this case, we got to register them all, as Professor Sharma nicely put it. So that should be a first step. Okay, a district level data or whatever. It's a question of aggregating from down below, and also we could involve the corporate sector, because I've been told by some of the corporate leaders themselves that at some level, the formal sector, the corporate sector, is linked with these people, their vendors, the vendors belonging to their vendors, and so on and so forth. And in fact, one of them openly told me, if we had insisted that our vendors should pay wages to their vendors, then this would not have happened. So in some sense, government can push a little bit of responsibility to the formal sector also in making sure that the entire informal migrant network, which is related to them, should also help with the registration. So that's one point. The second thing I heard in the debate is, a lot of people saying, oh, let's get the best out of this crisis. It's an opportunity. Is it the time that capital is going to move to labor for a change? Okay, so that's a lot of economists will say that instead of labor moving towards capital, it's capital moving towards labor. Internationally, we did see that initially. Remember, a lot of FDIs went to China, because labor was cheap there, so capital moved there. So that's economists will cite that example. It hasn't happened domestically. Why? Because we found that labor mobility costs are not so high, and the urban centers or the capital centers could hire them cheap, and informality was well accepted. Okay, so maybe similar kind of labor movement would not happen where the place of the informal sector is very small. So in that case, cost would have been high. But such a thing did not happen at a national level. Okay, and also it's rarely the case that the capital will move towards where the product is, because these days we have hardly any internal trade restrictions. Transport costs are cheaper. So you cannot also say that UP is a big market, so I'm going to see a lot of investors pour into UP to invest. That's not going to happen. You cannot also say that UP and Bihar has a lot of surplus labor now because of the reverse migration pool. So capitalists will be, or investors are going to come in to exploit that. That's, in my view, is not going to happen. Okay, so we are not going to see, even though it might sound very nice, very idealistic, that capital would move towards labor. I don't think that's going to happen in the near future. Okay, I mean, take the simple example. Let's say I'm from Odisha, so I'm taking Ganjam district. So let's say people from Ganjam districts are working in Surat. It might be a small factory where all workers are from Ganjam, let's say. Okay, but it's never going to happen that the little factory, the small factory outlet, is going to move to Ganjam and base it there. Okay, because there are lots of other complementarities involved. There are trade links. There are other supply links. All those kind of things. So it's not going to happen this thing. So what does that mean? So that means we are going to rely on welfare programs, as some of them have been mentioned, and we're also going to rely on explicit interventions. Okay, interventions in the sense of initiating new schemes, generating employment, and things like this. So it's not an automatic thing. So that's why it's in some sense is justifying what we are discussing or what other people will be discussing. And the third thing I noticed in a lot of say that has Lewis model gone wrong? So let me hi Professor Malhotra. Has Lewis model gone wrong? Because remember, suddenly I get the sense that migration is not a good thing, it's a bad thing, and blah blah blah. No, it's a wonderful thing. In the sense, in the context of development, you are going to see migration. Okay, and I'm a migrant, or I was a migrant till July. I was twice migrant. I migrated from Odisha to Delhi, and then I migrated from India to UK for So it's not that migration it's necessarily bad. What really happened was the way the migrants class were turned vulnerable. Okay, so they were highly vulnerable. So right at the beginning of the shock, it led to the whole process unfolding. So that is the thing. And so it's not that, so the Lewis turning point or anything of that sort. That's fine. Migration did pick up, and it did coincide with the industrialization, the spurt in Indian industrialization. It picked up substantially up to 2004, peaking around 13, 14, I think. Okay. But the nature of migration was not ideal. When we teach students in the textbook, informal sector is normally considered the residual in this migration story. So that is, you go, you try to find a job, you don't get a job, proper job, you kind of hang around in the informal sector. Okay. But here so happens that, the migrants were right being pushed into the informal sector. So the significant portion of the migrant population continue to stay in the informal sector, which is why they remain so vulnerable. So that's what. So it's not that migration is going to stop very soon. Of course, it's going to be like this for quite some time, and it's going to depend on, what's going to happen to the industrial or urban centers, how quickly they recover. There are signs that it may not so happen. And it also depends on what's happening to the COVID-19 scenario, okay? Because that's also going to decide whether, or determine whether some of these migrants are going to go back or not, okay? Mind you, their migration was a voluntary decision in some sense. So if, then things do not improve, if things improve where they were, and there is quite, strong possibility that they will migrate, at least intrastate. That's going to happen. A lot of, again, corporate leaders are expecting it. That's also good. So that's also going to determine, what should be our strategy, okay? Depending on the extent of, let's say, reverse migration, if you want to call it. So that will see. But supposing nothing happens, and we are in this, what are the things we can do? So I've got basically, again, I'm dealing in today. So I've got just 3 small observations. One is to what extent agriculture sector can pick up absorb some extra labor. Okay? I'm mentioning this because even pre-COVID, okay, I heard some economists, Professor Ramesh Chand being one of them, and saying that the traditional Lewis paradigm should be revisited, and in fact, agriculture or the rural sector should not only be viewed as a supplier of labor to the industrial process, but also it should be viewed as something which is going to employ labor. Okay, because industrialization is changing; it's relying more on automation, and it has, in the Indian case at least, it hasn't really generated that kind of employment. So we need to find some sector which is going to generate employment. So it probably makes sense that we should start thinking of agriculture and the allied sector as something which can generate employment. And this has nothing to do with COVID. In fact, this is our, we had a lecture and a conference before, way back in January. And so, that thing can be applied now to see to what extent it can absorb. Okay. So there are lots of, I can see lots of reforms have taken place, in terms of the leasing and all those regulatory changes that have taken place in the agriculture sector. So that might help a little bit. But again, that's not going to happen very shortly. So we're talking about a medium term maybe. So that's when, which is when we might expect it to, it still employs 40% currently, so it might go up a little bit. Or if not the agriculture sector proper, then it's the term I want to use is it's agri-food processing production, managing the value chains, the post-harvest, this thing. So that probably can be developed. Okay, so that can help rural employment. And the second thing which can go on is that we have seen, and there are some very interesting studies now which have shown that. So this is I must mention, I'm forgetting the author's name. This is what they looked at. They looked at different districts. This is pan-Indian study. It looked at different districts and looked at the migration and compared districts where public works programs have been going on and districts where they have been announced but they were absent. Okay, and the difference in migration was about 30%. The order of an average. So which means a district which has announced public works program but hasn't implemented anything will have an excess migration of 30%. Okay? So in some sense, we can see that if you have successful public work programs that include our employment generation schemes, Rozgar Yojnas. So then, yes, some of this migration could have been stopped. But now we're not talking about that. But these migrants who have returned back, they could probably earn a livelihood there. So that's another. So emphasis on public works, emphasis on agri-related these things. And the third one, which is it's due to my own chairman actually, Mr. Tarun Das, who has been advocating it. This is I'm borrowing Professor Mehrotra's some of old writings. That as a nation we are very low on skill and vocational training. Internationally and compared to China, we should not compare China these days. But in general, we are. So that's a gap which over the medium to long term we have to address if we are going to see this alternative development model where these reverse migrants continue to stay where they are, or we replace some of the interstate migration to intrastate. Okay, because then the human tragedy aspect. So in that case, I would like to. This was a wonderful news to me. This is the Bharatiya Yuva Shakti Trust, BYST, which works in association with CII, Confederation of Indian Industries. So this is a program which essentially has about 9,000 mentors by now, and they train about these 5,500 micro entrepreneurs. Okay, and basically teaching them basic skills of how to start a business, how to run a business, where to locate in the supply chain, how to do this, stuff like this. They're also given concessional credit like microfinance. And, I asked them, and how many jobs have you created in the last, 16, 18 years? 250,000 jobs they have created. Okay. So these are models which can be replicated across different parts of the country. So I think I've done my minutes. Okay, I'll stop here, but if other issues come up, I can join.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Mishra. I think you gave a fantastic theorization. You presented a model how the data is connecting the way developments are taking place. So thank you so much for theorizing it and also putting up the policy and solution context. While I was hoping I would connect with Professor Mehrotra right after you, just to be sure that we are in time, I invited Harsh Singh ji in between. So Professor Malhotra, I'm taking this just to ensure that we are not losing out of time. I'm sorry that I could have gone with the same sequence. So thank you so much joining time as you promised. So I would like to now invite Shri Harsh Singh ji. He has been in UN system and before that with government for a long time. And right now he is advisor to UNDP. I think one of the credits that he has, and I was present that time, he's one of those thinkers who, when Planning Commission was changed, was being looked to change its name and its structure, is one of those thinkers who said transformation kind of term should be added. So in the panel discussion, he presented this title, and I'm sure it became a kind of newspaper line, if not the headline. But his contributions are immense in kind of informal way to contribute to shape up what Planning Commission, how the Planning Commission moved to Niti Aayog. So he has another model coming from his model that he developed as Navodaya model to engage the laborers or migrants at the local regional level. So Harsh Singh ji, to you now, please.
Thank you, Rahul ji. Can you hear me?
Absolutely clear.
Okay. Good afternoon, friends. I come into this debate from two angles. One is some research that I did in around the early part of this decade and wrote a book called Structural Innovation for Inclusive Development in Bihar, the Navodaya Shahar Model. And the other part is what I'm doing currently in UNDP in a very large women's empowerment project called Disha Project, which we have done for 5 years. see, when I looked at Bihar in 2011, people were going gaga over resurgence in Bihar and how things were turning around, and Bihar was getting ready to be the third agricultural revolution kind of thing after Punjab. Now, I got very, very amazed when I looked at it. The Bihar's urbanization ratio is 13%. And many districts in North Bihar and all have 6, 7, 8% urban ratio. And then I found that there was a planning commission study that even by 2026, Bihar's urban ratio will not go up by more than 1% or 2%. See, urban area will expand, but rural areas, the rural population will expand more, and Bihar will have very large rural population. Now, already Bihar had around 40 to 50% of the rural labor, which was totally landless. Resurgence was happening in human development indicators, but when you came to secondary schools, because the habitat structure was not very, very rural, you could not get higher secondary schools, teachers, banks could not go, etc. So I wrote in my 2012 book that, floods of out-migration have created a safety valve for Bihar. But unless you do something to, develop your own demographic structure, you are going to come to a very sorry state of affairs. And I'm really sorry to say that is what has happened in this COVID. We have come to a very sorry state of affairs because the migrants, the large migrant income, and Alakji talked about it. In fact, some people say 2 out of 3 able-bodied people from Bihar migrate out or used to migrate out. See, the problem was most of their income, very large in aggregate terms, was not adding up to improving their developmental baseline. And it was just adding to their consumption, and one wrong health episode, and that's it. It used to be wiped out. So my theory was that if you cannot change the rural-urban structure just like that, you need a new strategy. And that strategy was that you develop a tier of urban towns, rural-urban towns, the typical towns which you see when you travel on the national highway, state highway, district highway, and the chai walas, dhaba walas with another 2,000, 4,000, 2, 3, 500,000 households. My theory was that you need to develop this theory of developing urban centers so that a triple bottom line, I came up with the concept of triple bottom line of the Aam Aadmi. I said you cannot deal with poverty alone for this class of people by looking at income alone. You need to address income, asset base of the Aam Aadmi, as well as access to human development services. And you need a strategy which brings all these things together. That will bring about resilience in the population, and they would not face the kind of things they are facing right now in the COVID. Now, what is the kind of asset base that you can give to, say, 3 crore, 4 crore of rural population? That is a habitat structure where even a poor person gets a small plot of land, etc., and then he gets access to some schools, colleges, hospitals, etc. And there are FAO studies that home and garden plot of 380 square meters, which is 3 katthas, can give livelihood of equal to 220 days of wage labor. And globally, there are studies of very large contribution of these home and garden plots to agri production, etc. So, but I said no. Bihar has been struggling with land reforms for 50, 60 years and has not been able to do it. So I came up with the concept of land reform plus. That land reform not just for agriculture, but for a diversified livelihood base. And that is what I said. I came up with the concept of Navodaya Shahar. which is, typically a habitat located deep in the, so that's how it's different from Pura. This is located deep in the rural hinterland. It gives access to people in terms of assets, schools, colleges, and once a habitat starts developing and it's very close to the agricultural rural hinterland, it will also start giving a lot of employment. And actually these things happen in a normal course of, demographic transition. But once public policy does not recognize it, they get stunted into very bad quality slums or rural squat, bad habitats. So that is my Navodaya Shahar model. While I put it in the case of Bihar, same applies to UP. Eastern UP has urbanization of 13%. Bundelkhand Central UP has of 20%. So the point that I want to derive from my Navodaya Shahar model is that one hears of very quick fix solutions for the migrants, that you do 2-3 months of skilling and they will be able to take off from there. I don't think so. The dip in income is so sharp that it cannot just be made for compensated by measures to increase income. An integrated strategy which looks at their asset creation, income support, and some human development linkages, so that in the medium term their plight improves. They still should migrate, they still could migrate, but at least they come back to a place. And there was an IHD study itself which said that around 2/3 of the migrants want to come back home, but they don't want to come back to a absolute rural area. They want to come back to a nice buzzing habitat which has a cinema hall, which has a market, which has transport. So even the rural center, so I estimated that if you develop 7 to 8 such Navodaya Shahars in a district, no place will be more than 8 to 10 kilometers away from a developed habitat. People from deep rural areas could start moving there progressively. People from urban area, squalor, can also start coming back to these, and it can become a very nice thing. So this was my Navodaya Shahar model. I think there is no getting away from it in this migrant crisis, and needs to be looked at seriously. And the thing is that it's not an investment by government. Through PPP model, this can become a win-win for the people who have land and who can allocate land and get back much, much higher returns by developing a habitat. What is required is political will and an organizing process. Rahulji, how much time I have? I want to...
Yeah, maybe about 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other part, now let me come to UNDP, where we are working with women, and we suddenly realized that our skilling approach for rural sector was very jaundiced, especially for women. We just wanted to make women farmers a little more better in technical aspects, rural youth as a feedstock into urban industries, etc. We never realized that the educated next generation needs more aspirational job roles of managers, etc., and working in the rural value chain itself. We are experts from urban areas, go to rural areas, do something. When we come back, the project collapses, etc. Therefore, we need to have a dramatic change in the approach to skilling. We need to create massive capacities in the rural sector, so that agri-value chain, artisanal value chain, community services, rural infrastructure, all these are managed by the rural youth, including women, whose workforce participation rate is 25%. It has to be improved dramatically through these measures. So this is a very new approach to skilling, which has to be adopted by the government if rural areas have to be revived to take care of the challenges and to build on the opportunities. And particularly for women, whose workforce participation rate has to increase from 25%. And tomorrow at around 3:15, we are doing a workshop on this, a webinar, and I'll be very happy to invite you and the viewers to it. Thank you, Ralji.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you. So especially 2 points. One, that governments have to sometime take the long-term perspective anyway only the short-term perspectives or meeting the immediate challenges is not enough. And the second is that focusing on women is a good idea because if they are earning, they take back almost 100% to home. If males are working and earning, they take about 60% at home. 40% is gone in the personal expenses. So I think the capacity building side is an important aspect here. Thank you so much, Harshji. I turn to Professor Santosh Mehrotra. Thank you so much for joining us. I haven't introduced you because you were not there. So Professor Malhotra is professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He has done so much in research and policy and contributed in different committees that probably a larger introduction would eat up all the time that otherwise I have requested him to contribute into us. So Professor Malhotra, if I could request you for your comments and observations and how, especially how to take it forward from the policy point of view, because you have headed many policy divisions earlier and now with Government of India. So you need to unmute yourself, yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Rahul Singh. It's been a privilege listening to Harsh and Ajit, and sorry I missed Alak. Can you give me a sense of how many minutes you want me to speak? Because I'll then structure my remarks accordingly.
Okay, so about 12-13 minutes, so that
that's fine.
Time
okay.
left. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to sort of structure my remarks into sort of 4 broad areas. Let me begin with how we got here as far as the pandemic is concerned and the migrant crisis. Because the migrant crisis is only going to grow in UP and Bihar, and I'll come back to that. Second, I'll speak about the economic crisis prevailing in the economy prior to COVID, and then the impact of the impact of what we are calling a stimulus, and how much benefit we are going to get to see. Then I will turn to what to do, and specifically in the context of UP and Bihar. So let me begin by saying that on the day that the lockdown was imposed after the pandemic broke, there were 692 cases in the country. We now have 1,000 times more cases. Clearly, we may not have done the right thing by imposing a lockdown at 4 hours notice. South Africa was also imposing a lockdown around the same time. They gave 4 days notice. There was precious little planning. And I think we are still paying the price of that in terms of both the pandemic as well as the impact on the economy. Let me explain what I mean. Our lockdown came way too early. And of course, we have, unlike Europe, which began to unlock after they had not only peaked, but their number of new cases were falling, we are nowhere close to our peak. If anything, the way we, in an unplanned manner, carried out a lockdown, we locked the very people who unfortunately are now spreading the disease across the country. I hate to be using this term, but they're not at fault. They were locked down, they contracted the disease, and they were locked down in hovels, in cities. And they couldn't move for the last week of March or April or May. They were, so obviously they still moved. And the Shramik trains began only on the 1st of June. So what we've done is that we allowed them to contract the disease, and then we sent them home. So we've enabled the pandemic to grow. You won't believe this one, but about a month ago, I participated in a Bihar UP seminar, and on that day, the number of cases in Bihar was 3,872, barely, of which 3/4 then. This is at the beginning, on the 7th of June. 3/4 of those cases were migrant cases, were cases of migrants. In other words, there is clear evidence in respect of the lockdown having caused this crisis, the pandemic becoming worse. And abhi to aage aage dekhiye hota hai kya. We ain't seen nothing yet as far as the pandemic is concerned, particularly in UP and Bihar, because UP already has yesterday, I think, become the fifth biggest state in terms of pandemic cases, and the numbers are growing every day. And it is tragic that it is in these two states that it is growing so rapidly, because these are the two states which have the worst health infrastructure, a subject that I will come back to in a minute. Having said enough about the pandemic, although briefly, let me say how the government reacted 2 months too late with an economic stimulus of 10% of GDP. We all know, it's fairly well known, most of us are economists on this group, and 9% of GDP was in the form of bank guarantees of greater liquidity. Only 1% of GDP was in the form of a fiscal stimulus. Now consider the following. I was part of government in the Planning Commission when the global economic crisis hit 12 years ago. And at that time, not only was there a monetary policy package, there was a fiscal policy package to revive the economy of 3 to 4% of GDP. Then when the impact on the economy was not even half of what we've experienced on account of the pandemic. Then the size of the fiscal stimulus relative to GDP was 3 to 4 times as high as now. Speaks volumes for the lack of understanding of macroeconomics. Macroeconomics 101 would have taught our decision makers to actually put in place a far bigger fiscal stimulus. The results of that are going to be felt over the years. We might be congratulating ourselves that the unemployment rate, which was at a historic high, at a 45-year historic high in 2018-19, of youth unemployment rates, which had shot up between 2012 and 2018 from 6% to 18%. And if you are a graduate, then it had gone from 18% to 36% between 2012 and 2018. This was pre-COVID. The unemployment rate trebled again in April, but it has gone down. But it is only halved. The level is much higher still than the 2018-19 numbers. And this is not going away, because all that has happened is that in rural areas, people are working in Manrega, A, and B, they are cutting the previous crop and they are sowing the new crop. So this is temporary increase in rural employment, which you are seeing, which is a cause of the reason for the decline in rural unemployment, Manrega, and these two factors. I'll come back to this subject a little later. In urban areas, what has happened? A decline in unemployment merely because the thela wala has come back on the street. The nai, the kabadi wala, the darzi, the phal wala, the sabzi wala, they have all come back onto the street again because the lockdown has been ended. So the unemployment rate. But at the same time, organized sector is losing jobs. All the sectors that we know, I don't have the time to go into that. You all know that. So all the prognostications are that not before fiscal year 23 is the economy, the level of the GDP going to go back to the 1920 level. Forget about growth. Forget about new job growth. So this is the situation that we are in. Let me turn very quickly to what needs to be done. Clearly, there has to be a bigger fiscal stimulus package. There's just no getting away from that. If you don't do it now, it's contracting this year, GDP is contracting this year, it will contract next year as well. If you do it now, you might be able to stem the fall, you might be able to help to revive the economy today. What is the stimulus here what are the most immediate actions that are needed in a stimulus? One, we will have to think about increasing funding and the number of person days per work for Manrega. It will, and Bihar, by the way, and let me turn very quickly now to Bihar and UP. Bihar and UP are not states which have done very well in Manrega. Historically is what I'm saying. Let me give you some numbers. In 16-17, they provided 37% days, when in the country, about 50% days. On average in the country, the person days per household has never exceeded 50, when you could go up to 100. In 17-18, it was 36% days. In 18-19, it was 42% days. In 19-20, it was 42% days. But the demand for Manrega in UP, Bihar, everywhere across the country has shot up. And yet what we find, interestingly, what we find is the following, that across the country, 80 million people were looking for work in June for Manrega. Only 62 million were given it. So already 18 million were sent back home looking for Manrega work. The result of the reverse migration that has happened is that real wages are going to fall, which is the opposite of what was happening between 2004 and 2012 when non-agri job growth was really rapid. Non-agri job growth had slowed down between 2012 and 2018 in any case. And now we have a situation where this reverse migration has taken the economy back 15 years. What do I mean by that? For 50 years after independence, the absolute number of workers in agriculture was growing, although the share of agriculture in total workforce was falling. But the absolute number of workers in agriculture was still rising. But for the last 15 years, the absolute number of workers in agriculture was falling because non-agri job growth was happening. It had slowed post-2012 under this regime in the last 6 years, but it was still happening. Now we've seen an increase in agriculture, millions more, when they don't have anything to do. So the real wages are going to fall, poverty is going to increase. There's just no question about it. So you will have to increase your allocations for Manrega. You will have to borrow. There is no getting away from it. Secondly, we need to have an urban Manrega. Why? Because actually it will be substitutive of rural Manrega. It will draw workers back. Factories, if you want to open, they quite often are not being able to open because they don't have enough workers. Their workers have gone home. They are not coming back. Thank you very much. They don't want to come back and live in hovels again and contract the disease in which don't you think they know that it's not peaked and it's going to go on increasing in the Delhis, the Kanpur, the Lucknow, and is UP and Bihar, are they capable of generating the jobs that their governments are claiming? Zero chance. Zero chance. These are the two states of the country where the share of agriculture in total employment is much higher. In Bihar, it is 56%. It is roughly the same in UP of the total workforce. In the country, it is 44%. And so, and the plot size is so small in both these states that the prospect of more workers being absorbed is actually zilch. So they must leave the rural areas of Bihar. And that was the one hope that they had, because they were the two states which provided 3.5 million of the 5 million who were leaving agriculture between 2004 and 12. We've now seen a reverse migration happening. So urban Manrega will be substitutive from a government point of view. It means it will bring workers back. You'll have to spend less on rural Manrega. Use the urban Manrega money to create low-cost urban housing on government land. Point 2. Point 3. UP and Bihar have the worst health infrastructure. They must spend more on health. No getting away from that. Spend your newly educated girls, and by the way, girls have gotten better educated increasingly. Send them to Kerala to get training. Kerala has fantastic training institutions for nursing, for paramedics, and so on. Bihar, child malnutrition rates were 48%, for 44% for underweight. In the country, it was 35%. Bihar stunting rate was 48%. in 2015-16. The incidence of wasting was 21%, much higher than in the rest of the country. The proportion of children fully immunized way below, and your total fertility rate, the worst in the country in Bihar. Even UP has bettered Bihar. What is the TFR in Bihar? 3.6. Every state of the country is below 3. Even UP is at 2.7. If you don't have a functional health system providing modern means of contraception at the lowest level, you will not provide better reproductive health services. In the absence of that, you are not going to improve the TFR. So let me close finally by saying something about agriculture, which Ajit mentioned, which I think let me say about food processing. Yes, Ajit is absolutely right. Yes, Ramesh Chand is absolutely right, but that's not agriculture. It's agriculture related. It can be rural areas, it can be urban areas. In that sense, I agree with Harsh. But I would here, and I would close here, emphasize that what Bihar UP need to do is, if they want to provide non-farm employment close to towns, close to villages, they need, in the clusters that exist in the Firozabad, the Muradabad, the Aligarh, you know what I'm talking about, the Madhubani, much greater investment into cluster development, and provide the skilling, Harsh, provide the skilling near the clusters. So improve the infrastructure in the cluster where the manufacturing is, where the jobs are, and you skill them, they will get jobs right there and then. They don't want to go back to Bangalore, to Chennai, to Delhi, to Mumbai. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. I think it was very clear, 3-4 distinctive approaches that you have given. And I would immediately connect with the industry. You know, the local clusters you have talked about, I think cluster approach has really been successful in this country, creating employment, also creating expertise, the skill set. So thank you very much. I have my learnings on the urban Manrega. I think this is very innovative. It will help the clusters to grow as well. So different states might have very, very specialized pockets of industry or agriculture process and so on. As I said, agriculture and food process are different things. We have to appreciate the fact. So going from here, this is why we thought having a practice balance in our panel is also a great idea. So I requested Dr. S.P. Sharma, Chief Economist of PhD Chamber of Commerce, and he kindly agreed to our request. So Dr. Sharma, if I can invite you and have your ideas on primarily the solution side. I think we have dealt on the problem side and we have certain observations, primarily on the solution side. How do you think industry is looking at it, and what are the pain points of industry which policy should address?
Thank you, BIMTech, for inviting me, for expressing my viewpoint and representing the thought process of my chamber, PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Respected Professor Santosh Malhotra ji, Professor Ajit Mishra ji, Professor Alak Sharma ji, Shri Harish Singh ji, Dr. D. D'Souza, Professor Rahul Singh ji, and all the participants and audience. Thank you very much and very good evening. Now, coming to the topic, firstly, I must appreciate that this is very good topic, because this is now becoming very, very significant for the ongoing activity of the businesses and economy to move forward and to post a comfortable growth rate going forward. Because if the migrant workers are not coming back, then there will be a huge impact on the overall economic trajectory of the country. But the business activity is now coming back and improving gradually. During the last 1.5 months, there is a lot of improvement in the business activity. The movement of migrant workers has impacted the economic and business activities though. But with the shortage of workers, now the businesses are trying to meet up their capacity requirements, to meet up their capacities and to meet up the demand in the economy. And the small firms are least impacted because of the migrant workers, whereas medium and large firms are severely impacted by the daunting impact of pandemic COVID-19. I think that may be the reason that small firms deploy more local labor and large firms are more open to the migrant workers because of the scale of the uh, uh, workforce in their respective factories. Overall, industry is at around 60 to 65% of the capacity utilization, according to our various interactions with the industry people. Small and medium-sized firms are at around 70%, and large firms at around 60% of their capacity utilization. Overall, the capacity utilization is somewhere between 60 to 65%, according to a recent interaction with the uh, small, medium, and large-sized business firms. And small and medium-sized firms, they have huge capacity to utilize, but they are impacted by the liquidity situation. Their working capital requirement is still impacted because of the reluctant behavior by the banking sector, because they are not getting to they are not able to get the adequate funds from the banking sector, and rates are still in the high trajectory, because though RBI has reduced significantly the repo rate, but that is not transmitted fully at the ground level, and business firms, particularly the MSMEs, are facing hardship to get finances from the banking sector, that too at the lower level. And most of the businesses have tried to call their respective migrant workers from their respected villages, but they are still in fear that there will be some another lockdown and they will stuck it at other places once again and face hardship to come back at their native places. So that's why they are reluctant to come back, and still the confidence is not there. So going forward, there is a need to build confidence between workforce, industry, and the government, and some clear-cut picture that how we are going to tackle this COVID situation, which is becoming worse and worse each day across the globe. So there is a need to provide them adequate and strong assurance about their safety and continuous support from the employer. Provide them fair and facility to transportation, medical insurance policies to them and their families, and advance wage payments also. They are because now they are not facing some confidence. So to build the confidence, I think we have to take a lot of efforts to meet up their requirements and to build them in the strong confidence. And because now the topic is that Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, how these two states are going to tackle this situation. Uttar Pradesh and Bihar are the most affected states by reverse migration of workers from workplace to their native place. More than 4 million migrant workers returned during this movement during the last 2-3 months. And together, these two states, I believe, are comprising more than 50% of the most affected districts in India. And such a high reverse movement of workers will have significant implications for the employment scenario of the migrant workers going forward. However, to deal with the situation, Government of India launched the Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana recently on 20th June, which is for the 116 districts, and of which 6 most affected states are there: Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, and I believe Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, and Rajasthan. The program is structured to run for 125 days and aims to ensure that workers and laborers are given work in their hometown and for their to meet up day-to-day requirements. And of these 116 districts, 63 have been selected from Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. As many as 32 to 38 districts are from Bihar, and 63 from Uttar Pradesh, and 31 out of the 75 districts in Uttar Pradesh are covered under this scheme. So this is, I think, some relief for the migrant workers to provide them adequate livelihood at this difficult time. Nevertheless, during these sensitive times, the policy makers shall focus at developing the confidence among these skilled, semi-skilled, and unskilled workers who have made an enormous contribution in the development of our cities, states, industries, exports, and the overall growth trajectory of the country. And going forward, I believe the role of the workers from these two states, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, will be very, very significant to push the growth trajectory of the country and to meet up the target of $5 trillion by 24-25. So we can't afford this migration in the long term, but of course in the shorter period, because we are facing the difficult times, so we have to facilitate them with the adequate livelihood facilities. These are the tough times, and this is not for one segment. This is for all of us, so we have to facilitate these migrant workers and various segments of the society, and the government is doing a lot. And going forward, we have few suggestions like social security measures shall be there to ensure survival of migrants in these two major states, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. And family medical insurances can be provided to the migrant workers because now they are in fear that how to meet up the day-to-day and livelihood requirements in this very, very difficult time. And I believe more than half of the migrants in India are taking place only in search of employment and business opportunities. And rural development is the key to reduce migrant migrations and attract business houses and producers to set up their production plants or hubs in these areas. I believe there is a need for transformation because our rural segments are also very, very educate areas for the growth and development going forward, because rural areas are contributing a lot in India's growth story. So going forward, to meet up the requirements of the rural areas and to meet up the requirements of the industry also, like land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Land and labor can be met up by the rural areas, and they can very much set up their enterprises in these areas. And cheap labor and land will also be available in these areas. So MSMEs can be encouraged, and large businesses can also be encouraged and incentivized to invest in these areas for the production processes. And now the major focus of the government is to facilitate the MSME sector, because MSME sector is going to become the backbone of the Indian economy, and this will be a major participant in India's growth story, and particularly for becoming a $5 trillion economy by 24-25. So at this juncture, I think this is time. This is a good time, and time is most opportune to provide facilitation to not only to the businesses but also to the rural areas. They will find a lot of employment opportunities in the promising areas like rural enterprises, food processing industries, and because we are an agrarian economy, but our contribution in the global food and agri and food imports is very, very meager. We are only less than 0.5% of the global imports. So we have a good opportune time to enhance this trajectory, and from the level of 30 to 35 billion dollar in food items, the exports can be enhanced to the level of $100 billion in the next 2-3 years, and then we can target 200 billion in the next 7 to 8 years. That will create a lot of employment opportunities. I believe millions of employment opportunities for the rural young workforce. I believe this will happen only if there is a strong coordination between the government, industry, and the rural segments, particularly the workers. And workers, I think, they will be ready to work in these industry areas because they want employment, and that too in their respective and native places. So this is a good time, and we have to support them, and we have to reframe our policy according to this difficult time, according to this COVID-19 impact of this COVID-19 on overall economic growth of the country. So I believe we have to explore the opportunities for the migrant workers in their native areas, and this is a opportune time also that we connect industry and migrant workers and the rural segments, and MSME is more keen to work there, and with the availability of the cheap labor and the availability of land at reasonable cost.
Right.
So I'm open for questions from the audience.
Right.
Thank
you so
very
much. Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma, for making an industry perspective. I think this was very important. Primarily, when you're talking about medium-term and long-term policy interventions and engagements. So thank you very much. I want to inform all the panel speakers, panel members, that we have a lot of questions. And I know, I planned for a longer time of question answer session. We don't have that much time, but we can still extend as much as panel members agree, because I see a lot of inputs and also questions coming from participants to the panel members. They are in the chat box, they are in the private chat box. I will put them together, right? So Renita ji, if I could invite you, you are the last, but of course not the least. You have an idea on, because you have been working in the domain. So Dr. Renita D'Souza has been working as a development economist, and she is fellow at Observer Research Foundation. So I thought, why not bring in a think tank perspective as well. So Dr. Renita, if I can invite you to put your views.
Thank you, Rahulji. I'd like to thank BIMTech at the outset for giving me the opportunity for expressing my views on this very important topic. I have a presentation, just like share it.
Sure.
Okay. Is it visible?
It is coming very much.
Is the presentation visible? Yeah. So the Indian lockdown, referred to as one of the world's most stringent, did less for social distancing and flattening of the COVID-19 curve than it did for the desperation and helplessness that it brought upon the migrants of the nation. The lockdown rendered the migrants hardly any buffer resources to last the days of the lockdown. They became victims of starvation and homelessness. So adverse were the circumstances that they were forced to walk their way homes to their hometowns located several hundred kilometers away. Despite the fact that the urban migrants form the sinew and steel of the urban economy, the neglect towards their welfare has been aptly demonstrated by this pandemic. Uttar Pradesh and Bihar constitute a major share of the total out-migration, circular migrants in the country. As such, one would expect that the reverse migration would also be maximum to these states. As per certain official data, about 21.69 lakh migrants have returned to Uttar Pradesh, while 10 lakh have returned to Bihar. The question that confronts the Bihar and UP governments is, how do we rehabilitate these migrants in terms of food, other forms of support, and livelihoods? So the question we need to ask is, why do people migrate from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh? The states of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh represent the middle Gangetic plains of India. This region is characterized by a large population, with Uttar Pradesh being the most populous state of the nation, followed by Bihar. The region is the level of economic and human development in these states has fallen short of the essential needs and aspirations of their rising populations. Of this vast population, only 11.3% and 22.28% resides in the urban areas in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, respectively. The unemployment rate of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh stand at 7.2% and 6.4% respectively, both greater than the national average of 6.1. These figures imply that the huge population pressure and the lack of urbanization have been responsible for the lack of employment opportunities, compelling out migration from these states. Landlessness, seasonal nature of farming, underemployment, low wages, etc. have been the other significant drivers for out migration. Both the agricultural and the non-agricultural sectors have shown poor expansion and development both in UP and Bihar. The state domestic productive factor cost of agriculture for both Bihar and Uttar Pradesh and the statewide number of factories and the workers working in these factories demonstrate this fact. The numbers are on your screen. Why do people, so most of the migrants from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh are located at the metros in Delhi, Maharashtra, Haryana, Punjab, Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal and Gujarat. Most of them migrate to Delhi and Maharashtra. The kind of jobs occupying them include agricultural labor, construction work, self-employment including street vending, rickshaw pulling, security guards, etc. The positive impact of migration on family welfare includes increased remittances, increased consumption of various goods and services, including health and education. There is, of course, a positive impact of migration on the overall quality of the lives lived in rural areas. But what about the migrants themselves? They are typically part of the informal workforce. Informality implies that lower wages, uncertain, irregular and uncertain wages, lack of job and social security, informal working conditions, etc. Being in the informal sector, these migrants do not even have a written job contract. Migrants are compelled to live in informal settlements such as slums. Many of them reside at work sites, open spaces, hovels, etc. Migrants should have been rightfully entitled to universal access of essential goods and services, but are deprived of the same thanks to domicile-based restrictions confronting them. Has migration really helped individuals become economically empowered citizens of the nation? One of the indicators of such economic empowerment is the ability to absorb or withstand economic shocks. The COVID-19 pandemic was one such shock. It pushed the migrants into the gulf of poverty because they did not have enough buffer resources to last the lockdown, no social protection measures to support them in the worst of economic times. Relief measures for migrants were poorly targeted. We now come to the question of how to rehabilitate these reverse migrants. There are three principles that the rehabilitation strategy must embody: support, protection, and empowerment. In the short run and medium term, migrants need to be supported and protected. In the long term, migrants need to be empowered. In the short run, they need to be provided with food supplies and cash support. Free ration of rice, wheat, pulses can be simply provided from the excess stocks of food grains available with the government that would otherwise rot in the warehouses. Under the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan package, the government has announced for migrants who are neither beneficiaries under the National Food Security Act nor under the state card a provision of 5 kg of grains and 1 kg of pulses per month for at least 3 months. Given the excess of stocks with the government, this supplementary rationale can be easily tripled. Also imperative to provide cash transfers per month for at least 3 months, totaling rupees 6,000, which is equivalent to the MNREGA wage of rupees 200 per day, as argued by the Indian Society of Labour Economics. I think this, of what have been spoken by scholars and experts on the panel, this seems to be even meager than what commensurates or sort of corresponds to the needs and requirements of the migrants. So this one could say that this is a conservative expectation. The implementation of these schemes seems questionable given the obsession of the government to identify circular migrants who do not even possess necessary documentation. These immediate interventions should not be subject to domicile-based access. For the period slightly beyond the short run, the question of unemployment needs to be answered. This is indeed a concern given unemployment and underemployment in UP and Bihar. Under the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, under the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, the scope of the MNREGA has been expanded by earmarking 40,000 crores to accommodate the returning migrants. Furthermore, the government has launched the Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana, combining 25 ongoing rural employment programs for an expenditure of about rupees 50,000 crores to generate 125 days of work for returning migrants. The impact of the Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana create new job opportunities and not displace existing workers, given that it is a consolidation of existing schemes. Generation of new employment opportunities is necessary to prevent depression of rural wages. Will those who return from cities, areas of destination, consider migrating again? Migrants have faced such neglect and humiliation as to have developed trust deficits, lack of trust on their employers and on the governments, both of whom have largely not come to their rescue in their hardships. As far as the employers are concerned, it is the informal nature of work that is to be blamed. Formal employment typically entails support necessitated by adversities. PM Modi has called for an Atmanirbhar India. Can informality driving the fate of as many as 93% of the workforce allow Atmanirbharta? The government needs to seek ways to make formal employment the reality of India. Now we come to the question of social security of migrants. If there was adequate social protection for migrants, their mass exodus could have very well been averted. The government must think about the social security needs of the migrants. There is a need to articulate a campaign for the right to basic needs of migrants irrespective of documentation. As Professor Priya Deshinkar observes, to devise appropriate welfare schemes and development strategies for circular migrants, it is very important to have reliable and nationally representative statistics. Unfortunately, the concerned authorities are not in possession of such numbers. In the medium term, it is required of authorities to map the migration profile of the nation and create knowledge and better comprehend the realities and circumstances and issues of the migrants. Finally, in the long run, both UP and Bihar need to revive industrialization, and the chosen strategy to do so can be rural development leading to in-situ urbanization. Poor governance is one of the hurdles to increase in private investment in these states. Both states are characterized by low ease of doing business. Steps need to be taken to improve the same. Given the current reality of migrants, their social mobility becomes a question. Industrialization and ensuing urbanization must address this. The Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan does involve a conversation about fast-tracking investments and measures to promote investment in the country, schemes to boost and augment, upgrade industrial infrastructure, initiatives for improving the quotient of ease of doing business, and so on. The focus of this campaign must, but logically, be on the two most populous but underdeveloped states of the nation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. If you could stop sharing, we can come to full screen now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. El, for your views. I think you brought in another perspective, although kind of summarizing some of the panel members are also talking about. We have a lot of questions. I don't know, I'm staying back, the panelist, but there are a few questions which could be important. So if you are there, I would like to put in some of those questions. So what I have done, I have taken these questions into a slide so that I can save time. And I would I'm going to read it, but I also request you to give your attention and maybe pick up your question if you like to present your views on something. So what are the practical steps union government should take to ensure the health and job security? I think it was addressed by Professor Mehrotra, but Professor Malhotra, if you like to take it again and elaborate on something additional in what you built up. The second question is it necessary to inject institutional saving habit among lower strata of society? There is need to comprehensive change in social security legislation. What is your view on it? There are a set of questions. Some of them are already dealt with. One of this is like, if the data of NSSO and census is not correct, what is alternative to that? How schemes like Manrega and PDS, so you already heard that, Professor Mehrotra talked about how urban Manrega can be developed as model to help clusters to do better. And another question to Harshji is about, has Navodaya model been tried anywhere? One of maybe USA was tried, has this also been tried? So I very quickly made summary of the questions. There are a few more, but I'm not including all the questions. So request you to, if you can take your piece of the questions and like to debate a bit.
Do you want me to start?
Yes, sir. Sure.
Okay, so I'll just take two questions. The first one about what steps this union government, I think I've laid those out, many of them. There are increase in the fiscal stimulus requires a much greater borrowing by the government. But in addition, I'm going to just reflect on two things. One is that the government needs to put in place a minimum income guarantee, certainly for a few months to begin with something like 2,000 rupees or 2,500 rupees per month to be put into the bank accounts, because the majority of Aadhaar cards are with relatively poor people. 70% of rural households and 40% of urban households can be covered through a minimum income guarantee. It's a design that I've already developed, written about. It's a ICRIER occasional paper, shared it with the Niti Aayog. It's a substitute to PM Kisan. PM Kisan is regressive. I don't have the time to go into why, but PM Kisan is regressive. It covers a very small proportion of the total population. It's perfectly possible to cover with just a little bit more money annually than PM Kisan, 70% of the rural households and 40% of urban households. On the assumption that after 2 or 3 months, 4 or 5 months, when we need to increase demand, consumer demand, for people who have lost jobs, lost livelihoods, lost incomes, wages are falling, that amount can be reduced to the same amount as PM Kisan, but to a much larger share of the population. This is point one. Point two, state governments are the ones which are responsible mainly for health expenditure, and they are short of funds, and UP Bihar particularly are short of funds. And they can consider floating health bonds, state health bonds, specifically intended for investment into expanding COVID hospitals, hiring paramedics, hiring nurses, hiring temporarily doctors, but then also using the health bonds to actually expand the public health infrastructure. So this is two things. On the data, we don't have data on migration, absolutely spot on. I should tell you two things. One, I'm on the Standing Committee of Economic Statistics of the Ministry of Statistics for the last 6 months, and I will remain there for the next 2.5 years. We have strongly recommended that a question must be included in the forthcoming PLFS, the NSS survey that is done on an annual basis. And it has already been included, 2 new questions. So about a year from now, just over, well, more than 1 year from now, we will have data about migration. I don't think that's good enough. However, that's already too late. That's what I meant. We need a quick turnaround. And thankfully, I know that CMIE, the Center for the Monitoring of Indian Economy, which is the data source that is a reliable data source, are already doing and capturing data from there about migrants. They have, in this last month and a half, they have captured this question. So honestly, I'm hopeful that this migrant worker database is going to improve shortly, which is what we need. And in fact, I mean, it is appalling. There are many amongst us labor economists in the country who knew precisely what would have happened if only the government had bothered to consult us. It didn't. And the poor migrant workers paid the price for it. 667 of them died on their way back, whether they were walking back or they were going back packed as sardines in trucks or tempos, or they were crushed under the train, or they died in Shramik trains, which instead of taking 2 days took 10 days, without food, without water. 667 died from the time the trains began. So this is an unacceptable situation. And why did it happen? Precisely because, as I said, of the way in which an unplanned lockdown was imposed, and because people were locked down when they shouldn't have been locked down, when you could have delayed the lockdown by 10 days. Anyway, what has happened is happened. Lives have been lost. Hundreds of thousands. I mean, I've just been reading while your seminar has been going on that the actual number of cases, epidemiologists are saying, in India currently is in the order of about 100 to 150 million. They are not 700, 800,000. And another epidemiologist a few weeks ago had said that the current government estimates are a serious underestimate. They're at least double that. So in other words, we have a much more serious problem than we think we have. And it's going to only get worse.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. Hershey, would you like to respond on your question? You have to unmute yourself, please. Yep. It's done.
Navodaya Shahar model has been tried, but not in a very organized way. It has come up. You know, there's a hamlet called Bhujuria, where artisans came and settled, and over time it has become a very vibrant community with good quality access. See, this is the thing about Navodaya Shahar model. The emphasis in this model is on creating assets for assetless and not on construction. And then it grows in its own strength in terms of livelihoods, etc. over time. Kerala as a whole is an example of Navodaya Shahar. If you see that, you know, over time the whole linkages have been created, etc. But no, there are programs like the Urban Program of Government of India, which talks about creating a certain hinterland around industrial centers, etc., the Pura, etc. My model is slightly different. I'm talking of creating urban centers deep in the rural hinterland, so that the people who do not, very poor people who do not have the wherewithal to migrate far, are able to benefit from such initiatives. And also the agriculture sector, etc., which is all there, is able to benefit through food processing and other things. Thanks.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. Of course, I mean, we can take more questions. There are about 40, 45 questions, which we tried to put in 10, and then picked up finally 5 or 6, which otherwise also covers most of these. I think I have to end here. This was really an interesting session. I'm receiving the responses of the participants who are professors and from media and from industry and students. So they really liked it. They liked the theorization, the way we have presented, and especially the exposure to some of the data which otherwise would not be known to them because Professor Mehrotra and Professor Ajit Mishra talked about some of those things. Harshji, you talked about the initiatives which UNDP is taking in the past, work that you have done with governments. So thank you so much, Professor Mehrotra. Professor Alak Sharma is not here right now. Thank you so much, sir. Professor Ajit Mishra, Harshji, Dr. S.P. Sharma, Dr. Renta D'Souza, thank you so much for your presence. We are obliged and we thank you that you spared time and gave your remarks to us. We end the panel discussion here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. We close with this.